Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you. Let's start with this. Sort of pass these around, please. This is another chart I made. I know you guys love charts, right? Charts and checklists. Yeah, it's a style. It's a way of thinking. Everybody thinks a little differently, but I guess Anybody else? You have enough? One more? You're good. Okay.
I don't have it. Oh, thank you.
Okay. So this is called the Positive Torah Literature. So another sort of chart covers the same grounds we spoke about in the menorah map, but a few more terms that I would like you to be familiar with. So again, we have 3,500 years, starting at Sinai, and even before Sinai, of course. But with the written Torah and the oral Torah, our tradition tells us that it was always oral teachings together with the written material. Maybe even if you look at the Torah, it says one of the most repeated verses in the Torah is Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor. And God said to Moshe. Lemor means to say, Lemor. So what does that show you? It's written in the Torah that God said to Moshe. Because there was oral Torah before the written Torah. Very simple. Right? So of course life happened, God revealed himself, and then some of it got written down. So there's always, the oral really is the primary source. Of course, when we speak of revelation, we're not really speaking about audio or video, but it's something of the soul. It's hard to imagine what it's like exactly to hear the word of God. We have the famous formulation at Sinai, right? And all the people, they saw the voices. Ro'im et hakolot. How can you see voices? I know there's some people that are very good at music, and they hear a tune and they can imagine the notes. That's a C, B, A formula. But I don't know what it means that they saw the voices.
Saw the voice.
That's what it says. That's what it says in the Torah, chapter 19, 20, in the book of Shemot. And all the people at Sinai, they saw the voices. Strange thing, huh? How can you see voices? You don't remember that, huh? It's a good book. You should read it sometime. The book of Shemot. It's either, I think it's 19. Maybe it's between 19 and 22. The revelation, it might be actually after the revelation, so it's closer to 21. They saw the voices. Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah. So whatever, that's oral. We're talking now about oral versus written. Of course, the Ten Commandments get written down afterwards, and the entire history of the Jewish people.
But what do you see when you see the voices? What do you see?
It says that they saw the mountain that was on fire with the flames, and they heard the sound of the shofar. They saw that there was clouds on the mountain, and then they had the revelation of God. So it's none of the above. But they were seeing the mountain, and they were hearing maybe the thunder, and seeing the lightning. And the revelation was in their hearts. I don't know exactly. Maybe there was a booming sound. What does God sound like? Chaim, you're in the running.
It's the still small voice.
That's true. It's true, right? We think, booming, it must be a very strong booming voice for God's voice. You're trying out for a play, for a part in the movie called God. You put on your best God voice, right? But very good. So Chaim, when he reveals himself to to Eliyahu running away, and he shows him on the mountain of the Lord. It could be he went back to Sinai, and there he had a storm, and there was winds, and there was, and God was not in the winds, and not in the storms, and not in the sounds, till there was a still small voice, whatever that means, the sound of silence. It's a good song, no? Heard of it? The Sound of Silence? Two good Yidden. Right? Simon and Garfunkel. But anyways, so whatever the revelation is like we haven't had for a while, we miss it. We miss the revelation. We wish that God would come once again to, maybe He will soon give us some prophecy. But until then, for the last couple thousand years, whoever claims that he is prophecy, we think the Talmud says, since the cessation of prophecy in the Second Temple era, prophecy was given over to two little children. Sometimes they seem very prophetic to us. They seem to know what's going on, or to idiots. But they say that the asylum is filled with people who are hearing the voice of God. Right? So we basically don't have prophecy now for too long. But in any case, this pretty much, looking at the chart that I gave out to you again, there's this, here I stressed a little bit more that the tradition, this oral tradition and the written tradition, has two parts to it. On the right-hand side, if you look at the top, it says the written Torah, the oral Torah, Torah Shebachtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's Hebrew. And then it says legal material and non-legal material. There's a word that I haven't been using too much, and that is halacha and agadah. Agadah is, the best translation I found is everything else. Right? Whatever is legal, whatever is law, so that's halacha. Agadah includes stories, includes myth, it includes history, it includes philosophy, it includes ethics, it includes lots of beautiful parts of our Torah, but it's not legal discussions. So halacha and agadah. You should know these terms because we mention them when it comes to the period of Chazal. You can see the Tanaim and the Morim, that's the gray section in the middle. Bevakasha. Boker Or. Pass this over to a young man. It's so nice of him to join us. A few minutes late, but all right. You see, in the period of the Tanaim, it says Midrash Halacha and Midrash Agadah. Two types. What do you think Midrash Halacha deals with?
About halacha.
Very good. In other words,
Explaining the halacha in the stories.
In other words, you're using halacha. What does halacha mean? Laws, exactly. So, and how is the Midrash structured? We covered it yesterday. What did we say?
To the specific.
Linked to the Tanakh, linked to the written Torah. The organizational structure is the 24 books of the Bible, and there are primarily 4 books of Midrash Halacha on the 4 books of the Bible, 4 out of the 5. Bereshit doesn't have Midrash Halacha. There is some collected. I have at home a book of collected midrashim from the Tanaim that survived, and somebody put them together in one book. It's called Midrashei Eretz Yisrael, and there they have some material that's parallel to the book of Bereshit. But primarily, we have the 5 books of Moses and Midrash Halacha about them. So if you want to look up the laws of Shabbat, where would you find them? Shmot, correct? This is the first time we get introduced to the concept of Shabbat. A few times in the Mara, and according to our sages, and then of course when they build the Mishkan, Shabbat is referred to before and after, and the man, of course, didn't fall on Shabbat. So you can look up all the laws you want on Shabbat in Midrash Halacha on the book of Shemot, etc., etc. It's the same thing with all the other laws. And the laws, you have to know where they come from in the in the Torah, in the source, in the 5 books. But there's also something called Midrash Agadah. Midrash Agadah, what does that mean?
Midrash about parashot, about Torah.
Parashot and Torah, the whole thing is Parashot and Torah. I don't understand. The laws appear in the Parashot and in the Torah. What do you mean? Let's try to define what Agadah is. What's Midrash Agadah? Aaron, what do you understand?
I think there are more stories behind the description, the Torah or...
Okay, stories. What else?
Probably some more for the education purpose.
Educational things. Okay, what were you going to say, Stephen?
Yeah, it's something like a Sefer
Keynote?
Yeah.
Keynote is
Education.
literature that we say when we're mourning.
The law, no, the Sefer Sefer education. The book.
Chinuch?
Yeah.
Sefer Chinuch. Sefer Chinuch is about 1,000, 2,000 years later.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
1,000, 1,500 years later. Yes, Chaim.
So sometimes for me the Torah reads almost like it's bullet point form. And
Okay.
so the Midrash is filling in the larger picture of what's going on.
Good. Yeah, similar to what Aaron is saying, that there's stories that sort of add on to the stories that are in the Torah itself. But I told you the answer just at the beginning of the class today. I said, what's the difference in halacha and agadah? So what's Midrash Agadah? What's included in there?
Everything else.
Everything else. Good. Okay, you've been listening. I'm glad that somebody's listening. So there's everything in there. There's ethics. There's stories which are like history. There's educational material, homiletics, all sorts of stuff. Everything that's not legal. It's a little bit fake, this division, because there are some laws in there too. And to tell you the truth, even in Midrash Halacha, there's some Agadah as well. Actually, quite a lot, much more than you would expect. But the concept of there being 2 types of Midrash is true on the grand scale. That's why I'm teaching it to you here. Okay, so we haven't been so explicit about that. One other thing I added in here, I have a good, interesting question for you. What is the earliest commentary on the Torah that we have?
Onkelos.
Yafeh me'od. Yafeh me'od. What other commentaries of the Torah do you know of? Rashi, you've heard of Ramban. What period are they from?
Rishonim.
Period of the Rishonim, that's right. From 1000 to 1500, right? Rashi, Ben Ezra, Ramban, you know those. There's a Perush in my, there's many Chumashim that have also the Perush of Rav Sadia Gaon, which is from which period? Rav Sadia Gaon. Geonim, right? He's one of the Geonim. His name is Gaon. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. Oh, our holy Jew from Hong Kong. Welcome back. You well? Okay. Great. Okay, welcome back. Pass this down for our friend Israel. So, what was I talking about? Sadia Gaon, right? So we have commentary from the Gaonic period, right? And then, of course, sorry? Yeah, that's a nickname. That's a nickname. He's not really a Gaon. He's in the 1800s, right? 1750. He's called a Gaon just because he was a genius. He wasn't officially titled a Gaon. Eliyahu from Vilna, but that's something else. Anyways, Rav Sadia though was. Anyways, we have commentaries. So before that, what's before the period of the Rishonim? We have the Gaonim, right? You have it on your page. You can see the the chain of tradition, what do we have before that? Do we have any commentary on the Torah before the Geonim?
No, but
I mean,
not really.
do you
Not
consider
really.
Mishnah or Tosefta to be commentary on Torah?
Yeah, well, they're sort of different books, right? We said that the structure was changed when we got to Mishnah and Tosefta, the 6 orders of the Mishnah. So it's not really written as a commentary. But what is like the earliest commentary on the Torah?
You have like translations before.
Good, but before the translations, what did we just talk about now?
Midrash.
Midrash is a form of commentary on the Torah. If it's written on every pasuk, as you know, so it's like a halachic commentary and agadic commentary. You have books of Midrash Halacha, Midrash Agadah. That's even earlier than the Gaonim, right? That's the period of Chazal. So you could say that's the earliest commentary on the Torah, but it wouldn't be true because Eitan nailed it on the head. Hit the nail on the head, I think is the expression. He nailed it, is the expression, yes. And what did he say? He said that we have explanations of the Torah even before the period of Chazal. And that is on your page. It says Targumim. Targumim, the period of the pairs. The translations of the Torah into what language? Aramaic. We also have another one. Greek. We celebrated, quote unquote, on the 9th of Tevet, just before Asara B'Tevet. We mentioned that there was an issue, and during the Second Temple period, the Torah started to get translated into various languages, whether on purpose or by force. So really, in every Chumash that you open up, most Chumashim, you have the words of the Torah, and you have right next to it the Targum, the translation into Aramaic. And it makes a lot of sense. That's the earliest commentary on the Torah, because every translation really is a commentary, right? Whenever you translate from one language to the other language, you have to understand it a certain way, not a different way. And so, but the truth is, in the Onkelos translation, sometimes it's a straight word for word, literal translation. Sometimes he adds in one word here, 5 words there, a whole sentence in another somewhere else, where he gives more commentary. So the earliest commentaries that we have really are the Targumim. You have it there on your page. You see it in the chart in the middle, just above the gray section. Yeah. Aaron, you had a question?
Yeah. Why is it a very bad thing to translate the Tanakh to Greek language, but it doesn't sound very bad to translate to Aramaic? Is it because Aramaic is kind of Hebrew dialect?
It's a good question. It's a good question. To me, it doesn't sound so bad to translate it even to Greek. Well, we talked about it a little bit on the 9th of Tevet. It could be that the difference is whether we're forced to do it or we're doing it of our own accord. And our tradition tells us that we hold in very high esteem the translation of Onkelos. By the way, he was a ger, Onkelos Hager. There might have been 2 people that have similar names, Achilles Hager and Onkelos, similar names, but there's a story. In any case, his translation, because of its earliest status, we attribute it with holiness. And we say that he must have had some form of what did we say we don't have anymore now? That the Second Temple period, we don't have any prophecy, but maybe we have something like a prophecy, which is called the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. We have some divine intuition that helped him. And so Onkelos, his translation, it's treated with great, great respect, as if it's written with the divine spirit. Although, of course, we have other translations and other commentaries afterwards that show different sides of the writings of the Torah. But the Targumim was very, very ancient, very early in our tradition, and it's considered to be holy. Could be because of the language of Aramaic, but I think it's more because of who did it and under what context. It sounds like Onkelos was actually passing down to us part of that oral tradition, which was never written down. You could say perhaps the first part of the oral tradition that gets written down is the translations. Targum to Aramaic. There's another one called Targum Yonatan. There's another one It's otherwise known as Targum Yerushalmi. There's a few different Targumim, but that's perhaps the earliest writing down of any Torah Sheba'al Peh. Then we have the Midrash, and then, of course, the big revolution of the Midrash, the Mishnah with the whole new structure, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, right? And the question somebody had,
You already kind of answered the question.
Oh, perfect. Even better, yes.
Would we be able to recognize prophecy if it by some chance happen again?
It's a tough one. It's really tough. It could be. The Rambam has a long description about how to test a wannabe prophet. And in short, he says he's got to make, first of all, he has to be worthy of prophecy. Our tradition tells us you have to be wise, and you have to be rich, and you have to be...
Rich?
Yeah, believe it or not. Yeah. Because, a lot of these people, they're like, it's a get-rich-quick scheme, right? To try to fortune tellers, right? I'll tell you your future and it'll be a better future if you give me more money, right? So we gotta avoid all that. So it actually says he's supposed to be strong physically as well, and wise, and upstanding, and a Torah scholar, and then. When he makes claims of prophecy, we still don't believe him. But then he says there's going to be a process maybe of him making actually some prophecies, some future events. And if they all come true to the T, then we can assume that he maybe has prophecy. And then, and if he falters even once, he makes a prophecy and it doesn't come true, proven that he just got lucky, He's not a real prophet. But it's more complicated. There's some more rules. Prophecies of good things, prophecies of bad things. One day maybe we'll learn about prophecy.
On the national level, right?
It's a good question. I don't think he officially writes that, the Rambam, but not necessarily.
But in the past, even after the Second Temple period, there are a lot of great tzaddikim came prophesied about the future, like who will be the emperor, what will happen to whom. There are a lot of
right. Very few and far between. Right, they're not considered prophets because they didn't do this on a consistent basis, and that prophecy is so. The Rambam, he talks a lot about prophecy a lot, and many of our sources discuss it. They describe it as an experience which is overwhelming. It's like when you would get the prophecy, you'd like fall on the floor, and like you wouldn't be able to stand up, and you'd like be totally overcome by something. And it's not just, you're having a conversation, you say, oh, tomorrow you're going to become the emperor. We have stories like that in the Talmud. But it's not full-blown prophecy. But it's for another discussion one day. There used to be schools for prophecy. I saw somebody wanted to start one now. Yeah.
There are many Hasidic stories with some kind of telling future.
Right, they said many stories about the Baal Shem Tov stories, how he would know what's going on the other side of the country, the other side of the world, and somehow mystically be connected to events and people all around the world. Amazing stories, and still, even the Hasidim don't claim that their Rebbes have prophecy. Prophecy is something else, of a whole different quality. Maybe Ruach HaKodesh, yeah. Ruach HaKodesh, perhaps, yes. Some divine intuition, yes, but not full-blown prophecy. Next, look at the chart that I showed you. You see which section is grayed out. We have the middle section, which, if you recall, in the other chart, we called it the period of Chazal, right? The period of the sages. Midrash, Mishnah, Gemara, founding the Talmud, ultimately being the end result of this period. Once the Talmud was sealed, 600, 700, there's different discussions about exactly when it was sealed. Of course, there's the Talmud Bavli, as well as the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was sealed around year 500. From then on, we have 3 types of books. Put together the codes and the responsa in this chart. You see that right underneath the gray line? The poskim are lifsok means to decide. So poskim are decisors. Don't think about teeth when I say decisors. Like people think incisors, right? There's different. To the decisor is somebody who decides. Decides what? Decides halacha. So there are poskim, many poskim. I'll say this many times when we speak about halacha. That the poskim say this, it's permitted. The poskim say it's forbidden. Some poskim say this way, some poskim say that way. Poskim means, nowadays we would say rabbis, right? Rabbis who tell you what the law is. But the more precise term, when you're talking about, some rabbis are just teaching you Torah. They're teaching you how to understand the words of the Torah or the ideas of the Torah, but they're not telling you practical law. So poskim really refers to law. So the codes and the responsa, the different types of literature in which the laws are collected. And I showed you yesterday, I talked about the Mishnah Torah and the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch a little bit later. Even the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in 1800, I have it here. And we didn't mention, but the Mishnah Torah is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. But you have it here on this page. The next column is something called Mefarshim. Mefarshim is a Hebrew word that we didn't use in our menorah. Maybe I should put it in for the commentaries. The faresh is to comment. The faresh is to explain. So mefarshim are those who comment, those who explain and write commentaries on the various books. As you can see, so there's commentaries on the Talmud, and there's commentaries on the Mishnah, there's commentaries on the Midrash. There's also commentaries on the Tanakh. Right? Of course, you know them. You read them every day. Some of you have a class on Rashi's commentary on the Torah, right? But there's also commentaries on the Torah, on the Talmud. Sometimes instead of mefarshim, the commentaries on the Torah, they're called parshanim. Parshanim is a same word. The faresh means to explain. So we have 2 words for types of commentaries: parshanim on the Torah and mefarshim on the Talmud and everything else. Also here you have in brackets here an additional genre of literature called counters of mitzvot. It's funny, we never really had, even when we got to the times of the Talmud is not structured around a list of 613 mitzvot. What's the structure of the Talmud?
It's contrary to the Mishnah.
Right. And the Mishnah is a structure of 6 orders, right? 6 categories. So there's no 6, it's not, some people will say, I want to know what the mitzvot are, and they want a list. There was never a list. We have oral traditions, used to be structured around the 24 books of the Bible, and then it becomes structured around the 6 orders of the Mishnah. And then there's a sort of a sub-culture, a genre of literature. Some people started to say, let's make up a list. One of the most famous lists was by the Rambam. But there's many lists of the mitzvot, and the Ramban disagreed with him on many things. This should be counted, this should be not. Since the Talmud brings the tradition that we're supposed to have 613. Amar Rabbi Simlai. He says, the gematria of it says in the Torah, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. It's in the poem at the end of the book. It's called Ha'azinu, the poem. And it says in there, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Repeat after me. Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah was commanded, Tzivui, right? Tziva Lanu, to us. Moshe commanded us the Torah. Continuation of the verses, 3 more words. Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. Morasha means an inheritance. Kehilah. What's a kehilah? Community. Yaakov, the Jewish people. It is an inheritance for the community of Jacob. The Torah that God commanded us, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Orasha Kilat Yaakov. It's an inheritance for the community of Jacob. So Rabbi Simlai said, if you look at the word Torah, and you take the numerical value of the Taf, the Vav, the Resh, and the Hey, comes out to 611. Yeah, this Taf is 400, Resh is 200, that's 600, and you're left with the Vav and the Hey, that's 11. 611. We're missing something. We all know. How many mitzvah? We want to get to 613. Ouch! So he said, no. It makes sense, because what does the verse say? Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe gave us 611. The first two, we got them directly from Hashem. We spoke about the revelation at Sinai. Now we all know that at Sinai we got the 10 commandments. Torah tells us a story. It's in the verses of chapter 21 in the book of Shemot. He says the people came to Moshe and said, we're going to die. We can't hear the word of God anymore. You hear it and tell us what God said. There was a revelation at the beginning. Everybody heard. And then they said, enough. So it doesn't say when this story took place. There is a tradition of our rabbis that it happened after the first two commandments. So the first two, what comes out, the result is that the first two commandments we heard directly from God, and then Torah, 611, Tziva lanu Moshe. So this is the source of this concept that we have 613 mitzvot in the Torah. It's and it became a standard. It's a tool, but actually, when you count how many things are obligated in the Talmud, there's more than that. It's really a big question how to scrunch it into 613. Some people put in these and take out the others. Put those in, they take out the others, and there's always it's become a genre of literature, a separate genre of literature, if you will. We have now 3 structures of Torah: the Tanakh, the Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, and list of 613 mitzvot. Various lists written by various scholars. Primarily it starts in the period of the Rishonim, which is after the Talmud. We have different lists of the 613. But as I said, it's not the primary structure of our traditions, but I like to refer to it sometimes as a sport. Right? It's a sport, trying to take everything from the Talmud and put it into, what's the primary list of 613 mitzvot. And as I said, there's arguments. My list is better than your list. But it's useful sometimes. You want to see, okay, what are all the mitzvot that we're supposed to do biblically? Of course, we have on top of that rabbinic mitzvot as well. It became pretty standard. The rules of engagement very early in this sport, the rules were that we're only going to count biblical mitzvot, not rabbinic mitzvot. And there's a big divide between the two. We have to understand what they are and why. Last thing I'm going to show you on the page is something I don't have on my Mesorah Menorah to figure out how to include it more is this idea of machshava, the third column on the right-hand side where it says ethics, philosophy, homiletics. There were always books written on these other topics, everything basically other than legal material and not direct commentaries on the words of the previous books, but separate books which have to do with everything else. Mystical side of Judaism, as you can see in the bottom, Kabbalah eventually got written down in books, the mystical mysteries of metaphysics of Judaism. I want to show you in bold, you have on where it says 1100, 3 books of 3 different genres of literature, and they're all written by the same guy. His name is in the middle there. The Rambam, he wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, Perush HaRambam, on the Mishnah. He wrote a code of law called the Mishnah Torah. He also wrote Responsa, by the way, and he wrote a book of philosophy. In some ways, it's a commentary on the Torah as well, but it's known as the Guide to the Perplexed, More Nevuchim. So many of our greatest scholars wrote all types of Torah literature, as you can see, but that's rare. Sometimes, usually you'd have somebody who's primarily a lawyer, what's that called? A legalist, a legal expert. He's the expert on law, and then you have another guy who's an expert on. Okay, he's a philosopher. The Rambam was all three. He was, and then you have another person who loves commentaries. He's an explainer. You've heard of Rabbi Steinsaltz, who just passed away. In many ways, people think of Rashi as the best explainer that we have, the best commentary. He wrote a commentary on the entire Tanakh and on the entire Talmud. So did Rabbi Steinsaltz, by the way, 1,000 years after Rashi. But amazing.
No, but they say the Ramban is always right. They say it like this. But sometimes Rashi.
Wow, my wife says I'm always right. Our marriage is fine. We get along that way. What do you mean, the Ramban you're talking about, or the Rambam?
The commentaries from the Ramban.
Nachmanides. What do you mean he's always right? Do we even know what does that mean, right? There's different commentaries. There's different ways of looking at the stories in the Torah, the verses in the Torah, and I don't think anybody would say Ramban is right and Rashi's wrong, or Ibn Ezra's wrong. We've talked about it many times. Let me give you an example. You have, a lake. Okay, now on the lake, this is the surface of the water. They tell the story that there's these little fish or amoeba in the lake, and there's schools of them. And all of a sudden, their world changed because a new element was introduced into the world. What happened? A can of Coke fell into the lake. Okay? Here's the little pop top. And it's just hanging out there. So they're going on this side, they're going on this side, they're looking, they're going around and around, and it says, wow. This is an amazing object. What do we know about it? This object, it's round, right? Because you go around, right? They can see, they go here. And there's something called a circle. There's something called round. And everybody's convinced, right? Everybody's unanimously, they all agree. This is a circle. Let's call it a cylinder, okay? Right? Because you can see that there's something going up, so it's a cylinder. But then what happens? The wind comes. Good morning. And all of a sudden, what happens? It topples. It topples. And now that same can of Coke is over here. Right? With the little piece here. And now they look at it from here, and they look at it from here, and they look at it from all sides, and it looks like a rectangle. Because the outline, when you look in 2 dimensions, it's either a circle or a rectangular. Like the outline of the object. And so then we had already 2 schools. I'm talking about fish. It's cute. We have 2 schools of thought. Some people said, I'm convinced that this is a cylinder. And others says, I'm convinced that it's a rectangle. And which one can prove it to the other? And this is what we don't realize is that perhaps it's the same object. We're looking at it from a different perspective. And so it's very hard for us to say, Ramban was right and Rashi was wrong. They're showing different perspectives on the words of the Torah. Also, from then on, we have so many commentaries. We argue about the Talmud. Of course, when it comes to law, as you can see here, the gray section, that's the source for all these matters of ethics, philosophy, law. We argue about them till today. One rabbi says this is permitted, the other rabbi says it's forbidden. Pinchas, did you get one of these pages? And what's the answer? They're both right. They're all right. Maybe there's not just 3 dimensions, there's 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions in some ways. Right? Ravid, what color is your hat? What color is Ravid's hat?
Black.
You say dark blue. Ah, you say black. I think it's gray. Gray is a little bit of white, a little bit of black. There's a little bit of white, right?
Dark red.
Talk about your beard. No, I'm not going to talk about people's body features. But the bottom line is we know the gray is a mixture of white and black. And so there's no... When we come to halacha, you'll find many times there's no black and white. As a metaphor, right? It's hard to say. This is absolutely forbidden, absolutely permitted. Depends on the circumstances, depends on the conditions, depends on for who, depends for when, for what, purpose, and so forth and so on. So it's a very rich tradition. So it's very hard. What you're trying to say here is, that the Ramban is always right. Not if you ask the Rambam. Not if you ask me. He doesn't think that the Ramban is right. So we don't have to. Some people like to follow one particular teacher, right? The Yemenites. They say it's a very fascinating historical phenomenon. The Jewish community in the time of the Rambam, 1200s, the Jewish community in Yemen, they needed some leadership. They had a false messiah, they had persecution, they had fighting within the community, and they turned to Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, we call him the Rambam, for help and guidance, and he wrote them letters and he gave them guidance, and from that day on, they accepted him as, okay, he's our rabbi. He's our rabbi. Everything we do is going to follow the Rambam's opinion, and it's a very unique thing that we have a community which follows only one rabbi and his final word. For them, they said, we're taking it upon ourselves as if the Rambam is always right. But even that's not absolute. There's some, they don't deny that other rabbis disagree and give different commentaries and different laws and different ideas. But they very much are very, very connected to the Rambam. And of course, the Ashkenazi Jewry are very connected to their rabbis, but nobody goes to the extreme of saying everybody else is wrong, right? Because in the end of the day, you can argue and debate. You have to practice, and you have to choose which way to practice. There's a practical application. What's the general rule that sometimes is used when there is a debate about, does the Talmud say it's permitted or forbidden? We read the Talmud, there's a contradiction in the Talmud, one place, the other place. How do we decide? There's a principle which everybody thinks, the Greeks came up with this rule. But it's a pasuk in the Torah. It says, Acharei Rabim Latot. What's Rabim?
The future. Many.
Right. Rabim is plural, right? We say Yachid v'Rabim is singular and plural when you study diktuk. We did a little diktuk yesterday, right? Yachid v'Rabim. Rabim is the many. So you have a vote. In the time there was a centralized authority in the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin would take a vote, and the majority won, and everybody would practice like the Sanhedrin. We don't have any centralized authority like that anymore, and so pretty much it's. We have small communities, and they each follow their rabbi, and for the most part, the traditions are very similar. There's a few changes here and there, a few different differences of halacha, differences of attitude, differences of commentary, but it's a system that's worked for 2,000 years since the Talmud, right, or 1,500 years. We manage, although ideally we would like to have more unified version of our tradition. We hope to get there one day when we reconvene a Sanhedrin, that's the high court. The high court sat in Jerusalem in the temple, and it had special powers when it was an accepted court of the entire Jewish people, which unfortunately we don't have today. We have a lot of disunity and discord, and even among the rabbis, believe it or not. But I try to be as accepting as possible. Okay, you got this? You got this chart? You understand? Okay, so everybody take out a pen, please. And we have another little quiz. You guys are going to hate me. You're going to hate me. This was a week full of challenges and tests. Pass them around, please. Take out a pen. Who needs a pen? Chaim is really on top of it here. He's got all colors. Chaim, yeah, question, yeah.
One of these and one of the question sheet for our family.
Oh, Pinchas got one of these. Yeah, good. Many of this, we've spoken about before, but this clarifies a little bit and adds in a few things that we didn't talk about in our menorah. I'll share it in the WhatsApp group as well, so you have a digital version. I guess what I'm going to do is take a picture of it because I can't seem to find it on my phone. But I'll take a picture here, and that's also good. Put it here into the share for those who are not here in person. Okay, you can choose if you want to look at the chart or not, but I wish I knew more Chinese. But you ask questions if you don't understand. Okay, let's take a look at it. Everybody finished or not yet? Okay, a few more minutes. Okay, sure. A few more minutes, yeah. The last question should be the easiest for you from the previous lessons. And the first. And the second.
Rema, which time was this? Rema.
Ramah is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch.
Ah. Yeah, finished.
Ah, it's only numbers?
You need to do like the
Oh, I see. Okay.
Alrighty. Are we ready to look at it together? Who thinks they got 100? Who thinks they got it all right? Lo ani. Huh?
I look on time. It's like
You looked, okay, that's fine, even if you looked, but as long as you understand it, that's the main thing. It's not just about memorization here. Let me just get a drink and then we'll get started.
Number 4 here. Like this.
Okay. Number 1. Who can read me their answer to number 1? Eitan.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Who exiled the king of Israel? You say Nebuchadnezzar. And who the kingdom of Judah? There's 2. Okay. What do you say, Chaim? Help us out.
I have the Assyrians for Israel and the Babylonians for Judah, but I'm not.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. You're right. The Assyrians, and the Sancheriv was the name of the general, and the kingdom of Judah was the Babylonians, and Nebuchadnezzar was their king. Who, very good. We mentioned this another day. Number 2. Who wants to answer? Who were the Amoraim and when were they active? Ravid, what do you say for the Amoraim? Who were they and when were they active?
I think around the year 300.
Yes.
I'll explain.
Till when? Till when?
Until when? 300 until... There were Amoraim in 2 major places, right? What were the places the Amoraim lived in?
Land of Israel and Babylon.
Land of Israel and Babylon, right? And what was their major work? Where are their words collected? Ravid, where were the words of the Amoraim collected? In which book?
Gemara.
Excellent.
So like from the 3rd century till like the 6th or 7th?
So in the land of Israel, the Talmud Yerushalmi
Till 6th century?
till the 6th century, about year 500, and an extra 100 or 200 years in Bavel.
Can we look at them as from the close of the Mishnah to the close of the Talmud?
Exactly.
Okay.
Precisely. Number 3. What are 2 types of midrash and how do their teachings differ from the Mishnah? Now I want someone to give me the right answer to this, please.
So we are talking about
Number
halakha?
3 now. Sorry?
We're talking about the halakha?
There's 2 types
Okay.
of midrash. One is, correct, midrash halacha. What's the other type, Stephen?
Anything that is other than legal.
What's the word for that in Hebrew? It's on the chart.
Midrash.
No.
Agada.
Agada, very good. Agada, with an aleph. Agada. Midrash Agada versus Midrash Halacha. And those are the 2 types. And how do their teachings differ from...
That I don't understand.
Good, good.
They comment on the written Torah. They are not necessarily oral Torah.
I don't know
I
about
mean,
that.
they comment on the Tanakh. But
We're talking about Midrash versus Mishnah right now. What's the difference in Midrash and Mishnah? Mishnah includes Halacha and Agada. There's a lot of Agada in the Midrash, in the Mishnah too, yeah?
So the Midrash is linked to its book in Tanakh, and the Mishnah is a reordering into 6 orders, vice the 24.
Good. You got that. I want to make sure everybody else got that. You understand the difference? They're both written by the Tanaim. In the year period, when did the Tanaim live?
Tanaim in the time of Chazal.
Right, which is when?
Year 0.
0 to 200. Very good. 0 to 200. It's the period of the Tanaim. And we have from those rabbis, two types of books. Their words are collected in something called the Midrash, two types of Midrash. And their words are collected in the Mishnah. The Mishnah. Gemara's later. Gemara's after 200. Right? The Mishnah. And the difference is that the Midrash is on the, sort of like a commentary. It's written on the structure of the Tanakh. And the Mishnah is written in categories in a whole new structure. Is that clear? Midrash and Mishnah. That's number 3. Number 4. What kind of literature is composed by poskim? And what kind by mefarshim? Let me hear somebody else has spoken yet. Pinchas, what do you have for number 4? Did you get anything for number 4? Yafeh. Very good. So Pinchas says poskim write halachic works that are halachic codes, and halachic answers, responsa are answers to questions. So there's those are the two major types of literature, by poskim, and mefarshim. It's another word for saying commentaries. So they wrote commentaries, commenting on the books that were before them. Okay. There's another word for Jewish philosophy. It's on the chart that I gave you today. We haven't been using it before. What's that word? Some people call it,
Machshava.
Machshava. Machshava means thought, right? Of course, you have to think when you do law as well, but Jewish thought. There's another word called hashkafa. The word that's preferred, hashkafa means perspective. So thought, perspective. There's another word which is most popular in this yeshiva, as opposed to other yeshivas. Emunah, faith. So it's studies of faith. It's, you could call it Jewish philosophy, really, but we don't like the word philosophy because it reminds us too much of the Greek philosophers and the academic study of philosophy. So it's really the study of faith. So we call it emunah, what we believe. So machshava is another one of those words. Machshava, hashkafa is used more in the Haredi world, or to properly pronounce it, hashkafa, the Ashkenazi pronunciation of hashkafa. It's the proper, you have to have the proper perspective. Ashkif is to view. So you have to have the proper view of Torah, ethics, and beliefs. It's called hashkafa, machshava, emunah. I used this one, machshava, for some reason. I guess it's sort of, that was what I used at the time. Next, 6. Who wants to tell me about the Rambam? Yisrael.
A question about the previous.
Oh, question first. Yeah, sure.
Hebrew also philosophical.
No. So if you look at the back of the chart, if you have the chart I gave you today, on the right-hand column, I use the word Mesorah, translated as TT. Oh, no, all the way on the left-hand side of the column now. I'm showing these two words. This was. You have the chart, Ravid? Yeah, you have it, right? So Mesorah, we mentioned it before. We called it the Mesorah Menorah. It means transmitted tradition. But part and parcel, together with the transmitted tradition, throughout our Jewish culture, we also have another element, which is called chidush. Chidush means inspired innovation. It's not just a question of handing down the baton, or because, many times when we were kids, we played a game. It was called Broken Telephone. Right? Do you know how to play that game? You whisper a word to somebody in his ear, and he has to give it to the next guy, he has to give it to the next guy, and he has to give it to the next guy, and you go all the way around until at the end, it's a different word. The word changes because people hear it differently. Information gets corrupted, So there's an issue. Of course, we try when we do a very good job of keeping the tradition precise, but it's not only a question of just telling over what my teachers told me. There's a concept called chidush. God wanted us to take that baton and to turn it into a firecracker. He wanted us to build buildings with the batons that he gave us. He wanted us to create. There's a midrash. Many times I've shared it before. I don't think I have enough copies here for everybody today. The midrash speaks about the servant of the king who was given a sack of wheat berries to guard for the king when he went away. And the 1 week turns into 2 weeks, into 2 months, into 2 years. Comes back after 2 years, and the king goes to his trusted servant and he says, "Where are my wheat berries? Where's my sack of wheat?" And the servant says to him, to be precise, there were 2 servants. One of them says, "Here it is. I've been guarding it with my life, kept it locked up in a safe, and here it is." And the other servant says to him, "Come over to my house this evening at 6 p.m. He comes over and he welcomes the king to his house. And in the house he sees there's a table. And on the table is a beautiful tablecloth. And on the table with the tablecloth, there's a beautiful array of pastries and breads. And he says, "Here's your bag of wheat." The tablecloth he made out of the stalks. He turned it into fabric. And the wheat berries, he grind them up and made bread for him. And this is the ideal servant, the ideal minister to the king. God wants us to take the raw materials that he gave us in the Torah and in the oral teachings and to develop it and to create new laws. And because bread is tastier than wheat berries, if you ask me, right? Especially if you add some sugar, some pastry, right? So this is the oral law. It includes an element of innovation, chidush. That's what chidush is. It applies throughout. We see it a lot in the times of Chazal. Chazal, we have, of course, transmitted tradition, as we've been talking about, but also there's innovations, new ideas, new developments from. Let's just tell one more story about this, the idea of development. We have to get back to the laws of Shabbat. I know that's the title of this class. We're going to get there. One last story. They say that they created a time machine. You've seen the movie? Back to the Future? 3 movies, right? You can enter the machine and go to any era that you want in history. So they say that once upon a time they put Euclid, it's a Greek philosopher, Euclid, who was very good at math. They brought him to the future, and they brought him here to Jerusalem, and they showed him the string bridge that's holding up a train and people walking on it, and he was amazed. He says, "How did you? What an engineering feat! We have an engineer with us, right?" And before I forget, we wish you well, and you're traveling tonight, right? So I wish you success, and follow our class on YouTube by all means, and come back soon at the right time, with the right letters of recommendation, right? So in any case, he was amazed. He said, "I can't imagine how human being could create such a bridge." They said to him, you know what they said to him? It's all based on your formula, Euclidean geometry. It's all based on Euclid. The fact that we're able to now to create such amazing innovations, all based on the raw materials, the DNA of basic geometry. It comes from Euclid. It's amazing. What a nice story, huh? And there's a very similar story about Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu gets into the time machine and he asks to see, I hear there's a great rabbi in the future. What was his name? You've heard this story before, maybe. He wanted to see Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, I heard that Rabbi Akiva, he says Torah, which is unbelievable, amazing teacher of Torah in this period of Chazal. He says such amazing, teaches such detail and such depth. I got to see this guy, Rabbi Akiva. So he comes over to Rabbi Akiva, and Moshe Rabbeinu sits in the back of the class, and he listens in. And maybe some of you will identify here. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu broke down crying. I don't understand a thing. I don't know what's going on. I can't understand what Rabbi Akiva is talking about. And he was so upset. This is because I guess there's a new Torah. And the book that I wrote is passé. And then, the very last part of the class, the student raises his question. And he says to Rabbi Akiva, where do you know that from? How did you get to this conclusion in your Torah lecture? And he says to him, Halacha leMoshe miSinai. It's all based on the rules given to Moshe at Sinai. Moshe hears this, and his soul returns to him. He's happy once again. He understands that the entire Talmud and all of its new laws and debates and the great innovations, they're all based on the tradition handed to us down from Sinai. So that's what Mesorah, our tradition consists of, Mesorah and Chidush. Right? Mesorah and Chidush. Transmitted TT and II. Right? TT and II. Transmitted tradition and inspired innovation. We have both are very central elements to our tradition. So, I don't know. You said the word chidush. We haven't used it, but it's here on the page. Let's go back and finish it up. When did the Rambam live? Who wants to tell me number 6? And what kind of works he wrote? Can I hear from somebody else?
12th century.
Okay.
Mishnah Torah, and there's a guide for the perp flats.
Yes.
And he also wrote a commentary.
Yes, commentary on the Mishnah. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. It's one of the earliest books he wrote. Good, very good. So it was part of the Rishonim. If you don't know the numbers, it's not important to remember the numbers. It's as important as knowing that he was a Rishon. Okay, number 7, last one is, what's the historical order? Okay, what's number 1? What'd you get, Chaim?
I was wrong. I put the first temple first.
What comes before the first temple?
Hittite rule.
So now you know. So you weren't wrong. So you looked. You're saying without looking. Yeah.
Without looking.
The Hittites, right? That was the biblical book of Bereshit, right? Avram goes to Ephron in Hebron. He's called Ephron HaChiti, the Hittite. So the first is the Hittite rule. What's next?
First temple.
First temple. Good. And then Hasmonean rules in the second temple. Good. Then fourth. What do we have then? Mishnah. Very good, Ravid. Very good. Mishnah. Then comes, what's left? Geonim. Very good. The period after the Talmud is the Geonim. And then?
Rashi.
Rashi was in the Rishonim, and Ramah was one of the Acharonim. Good, Ramah. Rabbi Moshe Isserlis lived in Krakow. He wrote a commentary on the Tur and the Beit Yosef, and then also on the Shulchan Aruch, and many other books as well. Great halachist. My family's from Krakow, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. Probably he was a teacher of my great grandfather. Yafeh, good exercise.
Yes.
You're getting a handle of this structure of Jewish history. The more we do it, I thought you'd be bored. You say it helps you remember. I agree. That's why I did it. Let's open up our laws of Shabbat and try to do a little bit of laws of Shabbat today, as much as time will allow us. Because tomorrow, I hope that should be the last day. Tomorrow should be the last day of the laws of Shabbat. We have to move on to the laws of Kashrut. We'll see how much we get covered today and tomorrow. We were still on the spirit of Shabbat. You're not allowed to do things not in the spirit of Shabbat. So it mentions here exercise. If you're not allowed to sweat, to work up a sweat. So exactly how you define exercise, he talks about it here. You can see we don't usually ride a bicycle. The rabbis frown on it for a number of reasons. One is that it changes the character. The big question is scooters. Nowadays, everybody has scooters. So electric, obviously you're not going to use the electric on Shabbat, but can you use the not electric scooter? Well, children is one thing, but for adults, it's sort of like a bicycle. It's not in the spirit of Shabbat.
The Syrian Jews.
It depends what the age of the child is. Sorry?
The Syrian Jews do that.
They do what?
They ride bicycles and probably also use
Syrian Jews?
yes, Syrian.
Where?
I heard that in the U.S. they have the tradition they can.
Interesting. Could be. Okay. Could be. Right. When bicycles were created, the poskim discussed it. There's a few issues. Some people say they were afraid you might fix the bicycle, just like with musical instruments, you don't play because you might fix them, which would be violating Torah laws even. And also bicycles, they break down all the time, and maybe you need to fix them. Others say it's a problem of carrying, what we spoke about the last few days. If there's no Eruv, you might carry it. Other people say that what I started with, and that's just, it ruins the character of the day. Character of the day, Shabbat, you're supposed to be at home, at rest, and not this means of mass transportation definitely can change the character of the day. When you walk in Tel Aviv, I don't know if you've been recently, but it's scary. In some places, you can't walk on the sidewalk because there's scooters everywhere. It's like a highway. It's a dangerous thing. So we don't want to change the character of the day. If everybody's riding their scooters, it could really... Anyways, it's most Orthodox communities forbid the use of bicycles and other transportation devices. Yeah.
This is just going back to prepping for Shabbat. I thought of this question after the class yesterday. If we're, let's say we're going to bake challah for Shabbat.
If you're what?
If we're baking our challah for Shabbat.
Baking challah for Shabbat, great.
Can we bake on Thursday so that we're less, but do we have to have
Yes.
the intention that it's in the bracha?
Yeah, you don't really have to have the intention
Okay.
when you're baking the challah. But yeah, by all means, we have refrigeration and
Okay.
freezers. And, many times. Friday is a short day.
Yes.
You try to squeeze all the preparations for Shabbat into Friday. You might even bring in Shabbat late, which is dangerous. You don't do any work after sunset. So, by all means, it's good to start preparing. The other day I went shopping with a student. He says, "Why are you buying all this food?" This is for Shabbat. He said it to me, it's Monday. I say, well, you'll learn. When you have a bigger home, when you have guests, and you see there's a lot to do, and a lot of cooking to do, a lot of preparation. And it's best to start preparing even earlier. So, okay, we mentioned you shouldn't be talking about business on Shabbat. and walking to places when I was building my house near where I lived. So, you want to walk by and see what the workers did, how things are, supervised. Not on Shabbat. That's mundane matters. I think we even mentioned about you shouldn't be reading advertisements on Shabbat, and newspapers. In general, secular materials, if they have no value. On the other hand, other people say, my enjoyment, my pleasure is to catch up on what's going on in the world and to read interesting stories and news. So technically, if you don't read any of the advertisements, which have to do with business and stuff, it's hard to make that distinction. Technically, it's not prohibited. Of course, Torah should be used for, Shabbat should be used for studying Torah as much as possible. But if you need a break, people like to relax and read a novel. It's quite common that people do read other materials. As long as it doesn't take you out of the spirit of Shabbat, there's room to be lenient about that.
Can one say jokes?
If they're funny. They have to be funny. In general, we found that the greater the rabbi is, the more jovial he was, the more good-natured and happy. It's a mitzvah to be happy and to spiritual life, your worship. It's much better when you're happy, and sometimes making a joke is a great way to loosen up and to the Torah. It says in the Talmud, I forget which rabbi, every Torah lesson he started out with a joke. Got the students interested, got the students relaxed, and then the rest of the lesson, it's like I'm trying to plant all these ideas into your brains. If you're angry, if you're sad, nothing goes in. If you're happy and joyful, then it's like planting seeds in fertile land, in moist earth. It's not the same thing as like trying to throw things onto a stone. Right? If your heart is closed like a stone. So by all means, I'm in favor of jokes, and they have to be appropriate, by the way. Appropriate jokes. Yeah.
Where's my bike?
Yeah.
You know the joke?
No, I don't know that.
No.
You have a joke to tell us? You want to share with us a joke?
Yeah, he's jokes.
What's the joke? Where's my bike? You want to tell it to us?
Yeah, the Germans, when they entered in Holland, what they did,
What did they do?
they destroyed the bikes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if without bike, you don't go nowhere.
Right.
So when they get together
Yes.
in many environments,
Yes.
where's my bike?
Where's my bike?
It's the nice joke.
Got it. Okay. We have Dutch and we have German people here. So is this true? The Dutch are always on their bikes?
All the time, they are on the bikes.
All the time on the bikes, yeah.
Supposed to bicycle every morning, like half an hour to school.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I used to ride my bike to school also, even though I'm not Dutch. So it's not only Dutch, but where's my bike? Yeah, it's not as much as... in China also, a lot of bikes. In Hong Kong, and they buy a lot of bikes also. Because there's no room for cars. But
Yeah, nowadays mostly motorbikes, like
right, electric bikes, yeah.
Tuk-tuk, you know tuk-tuk?
Tus-tus, we call it tus-tuses, yeah.
shared bikes.
Shared bikes as well. We have that in Jerusalem as well. Good. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, another question, yeah.
Yes, during Shabbat, let's say we go to a friend's house, they ask what I do for a living. So when I try to describe what I do for a living,
Yeah.
is it business or what?
So if it's just talking about in general terms what you do, then there's no problem. You're just sharing about your life and what you're involved in. But to get into a long, detailed discussion, if he happens to be in the same field, says, "Oh, you're in physics? Oh, I'm in physics. Oh, yeah. What are you working on?" And it gets into a long, detailed discussion of physics. That's inappropriate. But if it's if it's just sharing what you do in general terms, there's no problem with that. Right. Okay. Games on Shabbat also, we talked about reading material, which is not Torah material. I love games almost as much as I love jokes. And it's quite common in Orthodox homes for the children to be playing games on Shabbat because you are not allowed to watch television and play the electronic games. So board games is really quite common. Of course, if you can study Torah, that's better. But you are allowed to play games, and they're not considered muktzah because many times the only day of the week that they play games is on Shabbat. So it's a tradition. The rabbis like to play chess. They would sharpen their mind. What's that? Monopoly is a question because there's money there. It's fake money. So for children, it's allowed. Some rabbis are more machmir. But it's quite a well-known tradition to play even Monopoly with we talked about playing soccer on the field might be more problematic because you'd be leveling the playing field, and also depends on the age of the children and that. But when you get older, Shabbat is for Torah study and for sharing and getting closer to each other, enjoying your meals. Working on Shabbat, we mentioned the big problem. There's one occupation that is condoned, and they always work on Shabbat.
Army.
You say army and soldiers. One more. Hospital also good. What else? There you go. Rabbis work on Shabbat.
They just can't get paid for it, right?
That's the issue. Getting paid. But there are some people, well, some rabbis don't make much. But I'm a former rabbi. I didn't get paid much. But I shouldn't complain. It's an honor to serve a community. In any case, you see sometimes there's a bar mitzvah, a social event on Shabbat, and there was waiters. There's people in the kitchen, they're working. Or even in the Beit Knesset, there's a janitor who's working. Maybe he has to clean the bathrooms. And there's the rabbi, there's also a cantor. There's also maybe somebody who, an usher. How can all these people get paid for their work on Shabbat? The answer is they're not allowed to. If they're Jewish, obviously. If they're not Jewish, we mentioned that sometimes you can have non-Jews. But Jews who wait on tables, who prepare food, caterers, who work on Shabbat for bar mitzvahs and all sorts of wedding events and so forth, we use a loophole if it's for the sake of a mitzvah. If it's for the sake of having a celebration on Shabbat, the loopholes are... There's two major loopholes. One is better than the other. The best loophole is that you don't get paid by the hour. You get paid a global sum for contracting, it's called, right? Finished product is, I want you to take care of the catering in general. You'll bring the food, you'll set up, you'll clean up, whatever it is, and then you get a lump sum. It's not that I'm paying you for your work on Shabbat particularly. It's you're a contractor. That's part of the issue, part of the allowance. The second part is that if the entire job has to be done on Shabbat, it doesn't help you that you're a contractor. You're working on Shabbat. So we try to widen the scope and say that the cantor, even though he performs and sings on Musaf on Shabbat, he has to prepare during the weekdays. Right, even the waiter, the setup he does on Friday and the cleanup he does on Motzei Shabbat, and so we say the payment for the work you've done on Shabbat is going to be absorbed in the payment that's not on Shabbat. So you've widened the scope, and so you're not actually paying him for work done on Shabbat. You pay him for, as I said, the best is to be a contractor for the job in general, and some of the job has to be done not on Shabbat. And so you're not actually paying for work done on Shabbat. We make those allowances only for the sake of mitzvot, the sake of,
But
you
when
know.
you go with Nadev, it's no problem.
Sure, with Nadev, there's no problem, sure, right. Yeah. Mhm. Volunteer, yeah.
To bury.
To bury the dead, we don't bury the dead on Shabbat. It's a problem of digging, and it's a problem of muktzeh. The dead body is of no use to anybody, so you're not allowed to move a dead body on Shabbat. And so, we wait until the Shabbat is out, and then we take care of the body. But there's some details there about what you can do. If the body is in someone's home, it could be really scary for some people to have a corpse for the entire Shabbat in the living room. Right?
You know what I did?
So, what did you do, sir?
What I did in Sweden?
No, what did you do? I do know what you did, but tell everybody. I know that.
Better than you tell it.
Binyamin was a member of the Chevra Kadisha. What does that mean? Chevra Kadisha, a holy society. What's a holy society? Refers to, it's a euphemism for the burial society. Chevra Kadisha takes care of burial, and the dead bodies, they have to be washed, they have to be dressed, and has to be put in shrouds and then buried in the ground, in the cemetery, in the funeral service. Chevra Kadisha takes care of all that, the burial society. So so you were an expert at it, but you didn't work on Shabbat, I hope? No. Not on the Shabbat, we don't take care of the dead body. Right? Okay. On Shabbat, we don't, last a few things, I'm trying to finish chapter 22, the spirit of Shabbat. We don't prepare for the weekday. Here in yeshiva, sometimes we have the third meal, and then after the third meal, you go to Daven Mariv. Ideally, you should be leaving the third meal not cleaned up. Mm-hmm. Why do you clean up the first meal? Well, because you got to have the second meal there. And why do you clean up the second meal? Because you got to have the third meal there. But the third meal, you're not going to have any other meal. So just leave all the dirty dishes on the table. You don't clear off. Things that are going to go bad, like milk or milk products, put them in the fridge. But everything else, there's no reason to clean up now. You're not going to be sitting there. You're going to Mariv. So you don't clean up for Sudash Lishit until Shabbat is out. Because if to clean up now would be preparing for Motzei Shabbat. So you don't clean up. You don't prepare on Shabbat for the weekday, only if there's going to be some great loss or something like that. Like we said, putting the food in the refrigerator.
What about bread? When you eat bread, let's say at lunchtime, what I learned is you need to leave the bread all the day on the table.
Interesting. That's more of a Kabbalistic custom. I'm not sure that it's necessary. I mean, the bread will go stale if you just leave it out. I would put it in a bag at least. But if you want to clean up and move the bread off the table, I don't think it's prohibited. Could be there is a custom that Shabbat table should always have bread on it, but I think it's a Kabbalistic custom. Yeah.
Just with the wine, like as you make kiddush, it's a mitzvah to have the wine for the whole meal on the table, right? You
don't have to. Some people enjoy wine during their meal, so they leave the wine on the table. But no, you don't have to have the wine. There's an idea that when you say the Birkat HaMazon, that there should be some bread still on the table for Birkat HaMazon. But once Birkat HaMazon is finished, you can take the bread off the table. I don't see why not. Okay. That's it. I think pretty much those are the major topics in the spirit of Shabbat. Obviously, we're not listening to. Technically, let's say talk about watching TV or listening to music. What's the problem? I'll turn on the TV before Shabbat starts. I won't touch it. and the TV will play on its own. The radio will go. I like listening to music 24/7. Helps me think, helps me relax. Why can't I leave the radio on?
It's not a Shabbat vibe.
It's not Shabbat
vibe.
vibe. You're right. It's not the spirit of Shabbat. Absolutely right. We say we don't like machines making noise on Shabbat. And absolutely, this is machines making noise on Shabbat. But it's noise that I like. Maybe we can be lenient. Maybe it's nice. There's two issues. One, of course, the primary issue is that it changes the spirit, the atmosphere of Shabbat. We want to, better you should be singing yourself, right? Even if you have a bad voice. It's better than listening to somebody else's bad voice. But no, really. But if I'm not turning it on or off, I'm not using the electronics, there's two problems. In Israel, there's more of a problem than in Chutz La'aretz. Why is that? In Israel, the radio and the television is run by Jews. They're putting on all these transmissions for you to enjoy. And so you're benefiting from a Jew's work on Shabbat. When it comes to electricity, we said it's pikuach nefesh. We need to have electricity for the hospitals and for the police and for people not to hurt each other and for medical devices all around. We have to have electricity. We don't have to have TV. It doesn't save anybody's life, usually. So it's a problem listening to the radio and television in Israel, because the workers, most of them are Jews. Outside the land of Israel, though, I remember once as a child, this was a one time, I grew up in a religious home, but once, I think it was only once, where my father was so excited of a historic event that he left on, I can't remember if it was a television or radio, he left it on from before Shabbat in the basement, so nobody would hear it. It wouldn't change the atmosphere of Shabbat. And of course, there's, non-Jews are the people that run the television and radio outside of Israel in Canada, where I grew up. I'm remembering two things. It's not clear because I was a little kid. One was when man landed on the moon. What year was that? 69. 69. So I was 2 years old. Maybe that, and then the other one might have been the 6-Day War. Could be when there was a war going on in Israel, and we were very worried about what's happening, and so he left on the news in a side room, and he didn't touch it on Shabbat, of course, but he was able to go in and out and take, because he was just so excited. My father was very into world politics, and of course a very proud Jew and excited about that. I think those were the events, but I can't remember it clearly. I was a little kid. In any case,
Maybe Yom Kippur War?
Maybe. I would have been about 6 years old. So maybe that's what I'm remembering. I can't remember. But in general, you shouldn't leave the electronic devices on, especially in Israel, because you're benefiting from work done on Shabbat in prohibition, right?
I think if it's Yom Kippur War, it's life or death of the state of Israel.
Yes, all of the wars of Israel, unfortunately, are life or death. Yeah, we'll take last two questions. Yeah, Eitan.
It's also like if you be lenient with TV, after a few months you become reform. It's also not what you want to be.
Absolutely, you start with one thing, and then the next thing you know, I can leave my computer on, and I'll just watch the stocks there. All right, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to do anything. But this is, of course, dealing with business. Yes.
Here in Israel, how do we? And luckily, this hasn't come up since I moved to Israel. But how are we aware of things like terror attacks or rocket attacks or things like that?
As a matter of fact, when there's something going on, when there's a specific danger, it's called the Home Command. It's the part of the army which is in charge of communication with the population. So they create something called a silent channel. A silent channel.
Silent alert.
It'll be silent the whole Shabbat. You can leave your radio on, silent, and only when there's an emergency, an alert. You've got to go to the safe room, you've got to, in this area or in that area, only those will be the messages. There's no advertisements, there's no music, there's no nothing. It's only for the sake of security alerts. And that's, of course, a very important thing, to be safe, for the sake of saving lives. Many lives are saved because of these alerts that we go to the miklat, to the protected room in time. We have to be very careful about our lives. But in order to avoid this problem of, you have to be connected and hear the announcements, so they have a special channel, the silent channel.
You can have this application on your cell phone.
Also, application, another solution, yeah.
And is that kosher on Shabbat to have?
If it's if there's a security issue, for sure. For sure, of course, yes. The last
We have this also, like my dad has the phone like on, but like in a case. So something happened.
Okay.
Terror attack, you take your phone, there's like a special
Sure. You live in a dangerous place. So do I.
So
do I.
Yeah. It was in May, I think, the days.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we have threats against us, and every once in a while, Hashem needs to work overtime to protect us. Have a great day. We'll see you, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow. We'll continue with the last few chapters in the book that we haven't covered.